Welcome to Friends with Fertility, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of fertility, reproductive health, and all the emotional journeys that are in between. I'm your host, Elizabeth King, a fertility expert dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, support, and inspiration you need on your path to parenthood. Whether you're just starting out, exploring your options, or looking for solidarity and advice, we are here for you. Let's embark on this journey together and turn uncertainty into empowerment and make friends with fertility. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am so thrilled and honored to have Pamela Hirsch here today, the CEO of BabyQuest. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I feel like you guys have been getting so much well-deserved press lately. And even my husband was watching Jeopardy, I think last week. And the guy, he recorded it. He's like,
Right.
and we never have that show on in our house. He's like, you got to watch this. I'm like, I know. I was supposed to go to that event. I think it was like 2 weeks before in LA and I couldn't make it.
Oh,
But I said to him, I'm so happy that you guys are getting this press and notoriety because there's so many people that are still have this misconception that they're not able to have their own journey be helped with. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came to have BabyQuest
sure.
inception?
It was pretty easy, actually. I had been head of a very large educational test prep company. I had done that for 20 years. I had sold my interest in it. I was anxiously awaiting our younger daughter having a child so I could babysit once in a while.
Right.
And started out with a Clomid and then a miscarriage and more miscarriages and more treatment IUIs that didn't work. Finally, 4 IVFs that worked each time, but yet she had a miscarriage at 9 weeks every time after having heard a heartbeat.
Right.
And it became a very heartbreaking story for the whole family. And fast forward the 3 years that she went through that, we were very fortunate financially to be able to say, you need to have a surrogate. And she now has 2 children, each carried by a surrogate. And in fact, she owns a very successful surrogacy agency that she's had for 10 years now.
Amazing.
And this, in the early, 2010, 9 or 10, this became my mission of one day waking up and saying, what do people do if they're not financially blessed and they can't help their children to have a child, or they see that their daughter would make a wonderful mother and yet she keeps having miscarriages? What can we do to help? And that's when I woke up one day and said there needs to be a nonprofit dedicated to helping those who cannot afford IVF or embryo donation or sperm or egg donation or gestational surrogacy. And that's when I started BabyQuest the end of 2011.
So you've had a good run before all this time has, I feel like now it's just kind of getting in the news more prevalently, but back then is kind of, I did my egg freezing in 2012 and nobody was talking about these sorts of things.
Exactly.
There was no social media or anything of that sort. And this is an interesting conversation from the perspective of, I love to hear it from the mother's perspective, right? We're so used to having the conversations peer to peer of what it's like from us going through it. But having been a mom now myself and wondering what's going to happen for my own children, of course, I eat and breathe fertility all day long, but it's different, right? I didn't share it with my parents when I was going through it because of, a few things, but one was I didn't know how the ending was going to turn out.
Sure.
So like you said, the whole family was along for that ride. And then also I knew I wasn't prepared to answer a million questions from my parents' perspective. And it was a different time then, right? So this was all very new, and not only new to me to a degree, but also to them. And I just felt like I was keeping them from the heartache. So from the perspective for you as a parent, did you right away think, oh my gosh, my heart is breaking for my child, what can I do to fix this? Or were you like letting her kind of take the reins and stepping in as needed?
I'm very fortunate, at least I feel this way, to have an amazing relationship with both of my daughters. And Our older daughter went through IVF. She's 5 years. The girls are 5 years apart. I
Okay.
did have a miscarriage in between.
Okay.
The older one had gone through IVF of 5 years before, very easily.
Okay.
First time, worked, hardly tried. I just thought, oh, IVF works every time.
Right.
It's it's
Once you
it's
decide to
like
do it,
the
it's
perfect.
done.
It's done once, and that's once and done.
Mhm.
And then she had a great surprise that this older daughter, she had a natural pregnancy, which was very surprising, but worked out beautifully.
Mhm.
So she was all set with the two daughters and done. And then when the second one, when Nikki tried, she was 28 and got pregnant immediately, but then had the miscarriage. You don't think about it. And since we're very, very close, it just became a well, I'm a control freak. I can do anything. I've run a large company with 400 employees. I should be able to fix this. But
Right.
unfortunately, I didn't know anything about infertility, about IVF, or very little.
Mhm.
And my heart just broke for her. I always say when I do a talk that I can tell you exactly where I was each time she called from the doctor's
Mm.
office to say there was no heartbeat
Mhm.
anymore.
Interesting.
And thank goodness she has a wonderful husband who was with her each
Mhm.
time at the
Mhm.
appointment. But it's just you think about this and you say, well, what can I do to
Mhm.
help? What can you do as a mother other than feel so badly? And then I do remember she was in TV production at the time, and I remember all the egg retrievals, the several egg retrievals that she went to, and she was hyperstimulated, and she would take days off, and I would bring her chicken soup and we'd sit and watch TV movies
Mhm.
together. And you just think it has to have a happy ending, but how can we get there?
Right.
And for her, we were very fortunate. It was through surrogacy.
And did she have a diagnosis in the end,
Oh
or
yes.
it was
Well,
okay?
um, again, I knew nothing. I was a total dummy with infertility, and everybody believes their doctor. The
Right.
doctor is the authority figure, and she went through 4 IVFs with, as I said, successful every time, produced amazing quality embryos, lots of them, at every egg retrieval, and a very reputable doctor. And yet, at the time, after 3 years, we just said, why don't we try a different doctor, get a different
Sure.
set of eyes on this? And at that time, after one appointment, she was told that she needed an MRI, which she had never had. And that showed that she had a uterus that was sharply divided into two parts and could never sustain a pregnancy,
Mm.
called a severely bicornuate uterus. And yes, it meant there had been a lot of time and money and physical trauma wasted, but there was a solution.
Right.
And you just had to look forward to the solution of you can't carry your own child. Somebody is going to have to do it for you. And that's a compromise. And it's something that now, looking back 14, 13 years, whatever, and having seen so many hundreds of other cases, there are so many compromises. There are women who find that they've waited too long. They have no egg supply. And even some of them are in their 20s or 30s. They just cannot produce quality eggs
Mhm.
to make an embryo. They have to use an egg donor. There are some men who cannot produce sperm and they have to use a sperm donor. There's some women who can't carry their own children. There are just so many compromises, and yet you just have to accept that and know that at the end you're going to have a child,
Right.
and that's what counts.
Yes, I always say now there's so many paths to being a parent, and the fact that societally we are now talking about those different paths
Mhm.
makes it a lot easier to have that news said to you. So when that was, I imagine getting the news from the MRI was kind of hard to take, but then also understanding that there was a solution, but yet
Yes,
still that surrogacy at that point was really not openly spoken
it's,
about. So
exactly.
how did you all deal with that? As was that an easy like, okay, let's do it. It's done. Where do we need to go to find this out? Or did it take a while for you all to process it and move forward?
For my daughter and me, or so I should speak for myself, it took about 5 seconds to decide. And I will always remember sitting down at the dinner table across from my husband, who is very mild mannered compared to me. And I remember sitting down and saying, Nikki is going to need a surrogate. We're going to be helping her out. And I remember he said, we'll see. And I think that was the last thing we spoke to each other for about 3 days because I
Right.
said, no, it's not, we'll see. It's going to
Yes.
happen. And
Mhm.
that's him. He
Yeah.
has to let things boil for a little bit. But no, it was a pretty immediate decision
Mhm.
of, um, this has to be done this way if it's going to be done at all. And you're right, surrogacy was not as talked about or as common as it is today. And um, it was through a friend who at that time owned a surrogacy agency. I think my daughter and her husband looked at two profiles. They chose one. They met the woman who has since become a very good friend, and that was it. I think it's the process started in February. The match was done quickly, and so the transfer was, I think, on Mother's Day. So that's
Mm.
sometime in May, and Zoe was born the end of January.
Awesome.
So it was
Pretty
fast.
quick. And that's
Yes.
still to this day what I tell people. Once you make that decision of surrogacy and or donor conception, it does go pretty quickly. Of course, it depends on your needs and your stipulations of what you're looking for in the surrogate
Yes.
or the donor.
Yes.
But if you
Yes.
have what you're looking for, it's pretty
Hmm.
quick. So I say hold on to your hat because once you make that decision, it can
Hmm.
go pretty quickly, which is amazing because most of the people have been waiting for so long to become a parent by the time they get to that road that they're chomping at the bit to get that
Right.
baby in their arms.
And a lot of times, too, my daughter can speak to this obviously better than I can, but a lot of it, too, is just the whole surrogacy process and even IVF, a lot of it is trust, especially in surrogacy. And you're not going to be living with the surrogate. You're not going to be sitting there holding her hand. You're not going to check everything that goes into her mouth. That is it
Right.
healthy or organic, or you're not going to know if she's dyeing her hair when you've asked her not to. I remember these things are riding a bike, and you go crazy if you knew she was on a bike ride. But it's such a matter of trust. And sometimes you just have to suspend trust and say, yes, this person is carrying the most precious thing, the embryo, and yet I have to trust her. And
Right.
once you get into that mode of trusting, you just have to believe in the process.
And what a beautiful process that we have the
Hmm.
option and we live in a world
Yes.
that we can do that. I think it's amazing. And the people
Mhm.
that are the surrogates are a special gift from the
Yes,
heavens that can
definitely.
be able to do
Definitely.
that in so many
True.
ways. So, a couple things that struck me, which I found very beautiful too, is you saying that every time that she would tell you that there was no heartbeat, that you remember where you were because
Hmm.
that's the same. I mean, not only the heartbeat, of course, for us usually it's laying on the table and we get that news, but also the calls of maybe they didn't fertilize or whatever the updates were. I could tell you all those significant calls where we were at those times, and to know that you're so invested in your family, and most of us are, that
Right.
are going along the path. It's so, it just warms my heart to feel that connection between you and your daughters and son-in-laws is so close, because I hope someday when my sons are older that we can also have
Hmm.
that bond as well, because it's such an intimate experience and so unusual, and to know that it has touched your life, obviously because you went on to start Baby Quest all because
Right.
of this mission, is so incredible. So thanks for being such an in tune mama
Oh,
for your daughters.
well, I think, it served a lot of purposes. Obviously, it helped our daughter. Obviously, it's helped a lot of other people to have established Baby Quest, and it also helped me. I mean, I was somebody who had sold a large company and was kind of left thinking, should I retire?
Now what do I
Am I
do?
happy? What do I do? Right.
Right.
And it certainly filled a void. And
Yes.
it has continued to, sometimes almost too much, but I love it.
Yes.
And it has enabled me to experience the happiness and be able to share it with so many other couples that we've been able to help. And it's just like you were saying at the beginning, um, there's such a need for this, and yet there's at the very beginning when I started, I would go to a conference and have a table or a booth, and the skepticism of, you really are going to give money to somebody
Mm.
and they don't have to pay it back. There was that skepticism at the beginning, and some of it still is around today. I'll get little blurbs on the application or talk to some of the potential recipients, and they'll say things like, "The nurse at our clinic told me not to bother to apply because I'm never
Mm.
going to get this,"
Oh,
or
no.
"It's a scam," or "Oh yeah,"
Wow.
and which is really, like you said, we've been around now for since 2012 giving out grants. It's almost 12 years. We've given out over $3 million and been on different shows, the Today Show a couple times, and The View, and Good Morning America. And there's still that skepticism out there at certain clinics of, it's never going to happen for you, or
Mm.
why bother? And that's,
Mm. And
here is somebody who's desperate, and why
mhm.
give, and yes, we can't help everybody, and that's very true, but it's just a it's good to have opportunities like this to talk about baby quest, to kind of dispel that skepticism.
100%. And to that point, if that's the energy that's at your clinic, go find a new clinic, right?
Well, that's some,
Y-
believe me, that's usually what I want to say. I try to control
Yes.
myself, but yes,
I do not,
yes.
because I feel like that is such a huge part of our nervous system and our energy that goes into spending our every other day at this clinic with these people that turn out to be like your family and know
Right.
you quite intimately. And if they're not part of your fertility team to give you that hope, and of course it's not false hope, but it's an option. What if it
An
is you,
option.
right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
and you want
Mhm.
somebody to lift you up and be excited and positive for you,
Right.
because gosh, we know that it's hard enough to be there sometimes yourself when you're in it. So find the people that can be part of that and give you the resources for that. I remember asking when I was going through it, what mental health resources are there? And there was
Mhm.
only Resolve at
Mhm.
the time, and that wasn't something that worked out for me.
Right.
But now it's like they should be overflowing with resources and
Yes.
information for patients that
Mhm.
come in. And so let's get to that. When somebody is listening and they're thinking, oh, we really would love to do IVF or have a surrogate, but it's just not in the cards for us
Right.
financially or whatever, this is my big issue is it should not be
Right.
a luxury good to have a
Exactly.
family. And so companies like Baby Quest that are having their mission to help others is so beautiful. But if somebody's listening that's thinking, how can I be part
Mhm.
of this application process and what does that look like? Where do they even
Sure.
start? How
Sure. Okay. I really pride us on the fact that there are so many resources that we've provided. And when somebody says, "Oh, it's just so competitive and there's so many hundreds of people who apply," and which is true, and we can't give grants to everybody, but I try to insist that we have put so many hints out there into so many blogs and so many top 10 tips to apply, and people just need to do their homework. And it starts by going to the website, which is babyquestfoundation.org, and looking, clicking apply, and reading. There's even a cartoon that we've done, narrated by one of my granddaughters,
oh,
that talks about the process. And it is in a cartoon form, but it's very complete about how to look at the website, how to get the application, how to do the application, how to send it in, what happens after the application, and so forth. A step by step process. And there are tips, there are sample stories, there are samples of other applicants who have been successful, there are stories about each applicant. So we try to provide so many help, support samples. The application is an online process. As of about 2 years ago, we switched online, so we don't destroy a forest every time we have applicants apply. There is a $75 fee. People will say, well, is it really worth my time? And I've tried, and I have gotten several of the recipients to address that and to say, it takes time, it takes some energy to put an application together. You have to do your homework. Is it going to be successful? There are no guarantees, but you certainly are not going to be successful if you don't try it.
Right.
So it's a chance, it's an opportunity. And that's the same thing with getting a grant. We can't promise that every single person we give a grant to will have a child. We can just promise that this person will have the opportunity to do IVF, to do surrogacy, to do IVF with egg donation, sperm donation, embryo donation, whatever the process is that they've requested. They'll have that chance to pursue that.
And so how does it work? If somebody's wanting to do IVF and have use their own embryos for and use a surrogate, Baby Quest would pay for the process of both of those things, or do they
Uh,
say that it's obviously
how
they
does
put
this
it on
up?
the application of what it is that they're
Sure.
after, but how does that work? Because that's
Okay.
very different than somebody just doing one or the other type of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. So for surrogacy, let's say that somebody is applying for surrogacy through an agency. A surrogacy, unfortunately, right now, you could anything from 120 to 150 and above. That's unfortunately the price.
Right.
We would our grants generally can't cover more than 20,000, 22,000. Our biggest grants.
Okay.
And we have done that several times. So the best surrogacy applicants would be an ideal surrogacy applicant
Okay.
would be somebody who has done their egg retrieval, has formulated embryos, because that's part of the process and we can't pay for everything. So that's something that they would have had to pay for.
Okay.
They've had their embryos genetically tested and they're waiting to either they've signed up with the surrogacy agency who is ready to match them, or they found their own relative or friend who is going to carry. So they're at the point where they say, we know we cannot carry ourselves, but we have embryos that are genetically tested and we're waiting to proceed. Male or female
Right.
couples, it could be either. And that's pretty much the best time to apply because we have every grant cycle is learning a lesson. And maybe in the past we have done surrogacy grants to those people who did not have embryos yet. And it was just unfortunate. They tried to get embryos, they didn't want to use an egg donor or they couldn't afford it and it didn't fit in the grant and it just went nowhere.
Right.
So we have found that the best way to do that, the recommended way is for them to already have done their embryo creation. So in fact, we have 3 or 4 grants right now, couples who have been awarded grants who have surrogates either through an agency or friend, and they have their embryos and they're waiting on doing a transfer. One did a transfer, was not successful. They have another embryo, they're going to do another transfer. The unfortunate thing is to apply for a grant for surrogacy. Let's say you've already spent $30,000 on the embryo creation. You still have another 90, $100,000 of whether it's agency fee, whether it's insurance for the surrogate. You
Right.
have a lot legal. So you're going to apply for a grant of $20,000 saying, we can guarantee that we have saved up the balance of the money ourselves. It can be a loan. How did you get the loan? Well, we got a loan through such and such a loan company at X%, and we're already qualified for that. We need $20,000 to fill the gap. And that's what they're applying for.
Okay. Thank you for doing the breakdown for us. I think that education is really helpful for somebody that might be
Mhm.
listening. And once they are kind of down this line, it's a certain window of time that the applications are open. Is
Yes.
that right?
Uh, yes, we do this twice a year,
Okay.
spring and fall. The next grant deadline is September 6th. We already are accepting applications. There is no Is there an advantage to getting them in early versus late? Not really. I mean, I
Okay.
think that there probably are 10 applications that have already been submitted. They're in a file. I haven't looked at them. Nobody has looked at them. We probably won't for a while. After September 6th, that is the cutoff is like 5 o'clock Pacific time, or I don't know if it's five exactly, September 6th. As we tell people, please don't ask us for a status update. It takes us 4 to 6 weeks to go through all the committees, to look at the applications, to give everybody a fair chance
Right.
to review their application. And then we are very good about it. Within the 4 to 6 week period of time, we reach out if we have any questions. We, at the end of that period of time, we will contact those who we want to pursue more talk with, and we will also make sure to email anybody who's applied who is not fortunate enough to receive a grant.
Oh, that's nice. So they find out either
Oh,
way.
oh, yes.
That's great. I feel like that's always hard when you just are left not knowing and wondering.
Oh, no. I think, whether it's a job interview or a college application
Right.
or anything, that's cruel
I
to not
agree.
tell somebody. And I say there are some times when people write and they say, well, we never heard from you. And we can't control technology. There's always times when people have given us incorrect emails, when their
Oh,
email
sure.
doesn't accept it, it goes into a junk file, they don't look at the junk file. We do everything we can. We
Right.
post things on Facebook and Instagram. So we do everything we can to keep the flow of communication open.
Wow, I can only imagine, the emotional charge for people that are going through this and the questions and all the things that you guys must come up with, just like you were saying there. I mean, I'm sure it's a lot to be on the back end, the receiving end from you guys, because you're
Yes.
of course doing something out of the goodness of your heart and trying to help most people possible. But I also know from the other
Hmm.
side, there's that sense of and
Yes.
equal with hope, and how does that play out without with your sanity really through the
Hmm.
process? Because I know there's times for me looking back where I'm like, oh my gosh, I was obsessed with how my HCG was
Hmm.
going to get down, right? Like I was wanting my doctor
Right.
to check it every single day. He was finally like,
Hmm.
I'm not going to check it today, but I was so desperate to try to get pregnant again that I wanted to make sure
Right.
that that number was down. So I can only imagine what you guys go through with the questions of, I didn't get the email,
It,
or it was in my
yes.
junk mail, and all the things. So,
And everybody comes to this as troubled, stressed.
right,
They've gone through a lot of physical trauma, emotional. The mental health aspect is over. There's an overwhelming need for
right.
them to get help, and yet, we try to be as sensitive as we can, and yet it's very hard to tell somebody to say no to
Mhm.
somebody, and we only allow people to apply twice,
Okay.
and that used to be different, and they have to pay a $75 fee each time. And as silly as this sounds, we're actually doing them a favor, because if somebody has applied twice, and there are people who do get the grant a second time,
Hmm.
but they've changed something in their profile, whether it's like a 40-something-year-old woman who said the first time, well, I definitely have to use my own eggs, even though my doctor says I have diminished of reserve.
Hmm.
Well, that person may change, and then the next time say, okay, I've understood the compromise. I'm applying for donor eggs.
Right.
Well, that's a difference, and
Hmm.
a difference. And whether it's something like that, or whether it's just we have more funds the next time, or for whatever reason, two times is it. If we let people keep applying, we're being dishonest to
Hmm.
them, and we're doing them a disservice. There is some reason, whether they're asking for 50, $60,000, and they can't say how they'll fill the gap of
Hmm.
what we can give them. If it's a woman who, it's very hard to say this to somebody, but their health is really precluding their getting pregnant. Their BMI is over 45, and their doctor is telling them, or should be telling them, to be more healthy. Um, there are just a lot of reasons. And to let somebody keep applying and applying and applying, we're just
Really,
not.
from your guys' perspective, you want the best success for them, right? And so
Exactly.
having to
Exactly.
meet those criteria, and not to single people out for that, but it's really setting them up for success. And if somebody's
Yes.
coming to the table with not checking off all the boxes of doing what is recommended, then their
Exactly.
likeliness of really it being a full term pregnancy, live birth is not as likely, unfortunately, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
don't think it's, I completely understand where you guys are coming from. And I think if everyone can kind of grasp that concept of it's really just for
Right.
the benefit of everybody involved,
True.
and not really anybody out for any other reason of what's the best path possible. And it's
True.
XYZ, not determined by you guys, that those things
Exactly.
are, factual, that the doctors have stated. It's not like
Yes.
you guys are just deciding on your own. This
Right.
is what the level of success looks like, because
Right.
we all
And
know that there are situations where people do get pregnant that don't fall into those categories, but
definitely.
it's not the
Right. And we do have a team of doctors, besides the women's health advocates, the financial advisors. We have a team of doctors who look over the applications. And again, even if the patient's own doctor fills out the medical form and says, um, "This is what I'm recommending." IVF with donor eggs or embryo donation or surrogacy,
Mhm.
we have to know that that person applicant is going to follow the
Right,
doctor's recommendations,
right.
not say, well, I just want another one more try with my own eggs, or I
Mhm.
want to try one more time to carry, even though I've had recurrent miscarriages for the past few years. So you're right. We have to choose the people that have the best chance of success.
And is it the funding for each grant period, is that dependent on how much you guys make between those 2 times
Yes.
of how much you
Yes.
can give out?
Yes. What we usually do is we say at the beginning, a committee, a financial together and decides, well, we have this much money. This is what it takes. I don't take a salary. We have very little overhead. I'm in my house. Our overhead is maintained is very, very low. And yet we have to decide each time before this, when we come up to the reviews, this is the amount. Let's try to give out $250,000. How many people are we going to give it to? I don't know, 12, 13, 14. It kind of
Mhm.
all depends, because
Right,
we could give a grant of $3,000. We can give a grant of $22,000. It depends on need.
right,
And every grant is going to be different. And we'll give medications to many of the recipients as well. A lot of it is just determined. And again, it's determined by how well we do our fundraising.
right. Speaking of, I just want to
Yeah.
touch on that as well. As far as if you are in this community and maybe it's not a struggle for you, or you have insurance that covers these things, pay it forward and donate to
Hmm.
Baby Quest and or anyone else that helps the community, because it's a collective energy
Yes.
behind women and families in general, and our planet, so to speak, as I like to visualize it, is it's the if we help one person, it helps many, many more on the journey.
Hmm.
And with Pamela and her team going out to physically hand over this to somebody else, and they're doing the hard work to sift through what we can do is donate, is as little or as much as we have to help make a difference to that need. Can people get involved in
Sure.
the fundraising and the donating?
The donating is easy. They go to
Yes.
our website and they click donate.
Okay.
That's easy. We have fundraisers. We don't do a lot of big fundraisers, but we try to spread them out in the country. We had a major shopping event in Los Angeles, May 7th. That was
That's
our
the one I
second one.
missed.
It was amazing.
I
And
heard
we
it
were
was.
very successful. Yes,
Yes.
it was. Um, it took a ton of planning, and the committee was wonderful. The support was wonderful. It's just a lot. It's a lot of work, but it was definitely worth it. We raised more than $50,000,
Awesome.
and it was awesome and a great event. So we had that. We're going to have a much less extensive fundraiser cocktail party October 29th in New York, run by some of our New York constituents, board members that live there. Excuse me. We will be having some type of spring event next year in Los Angeles. Not sure what. exactly. And from time to time, we'll be doing panels, and we always have things like one of our influencers right now is running a campaign online with a clothing brand called Oh So and Me, and she's raising money. 20% of proceeds come to us. There are several companies that are doing that. And it's always wonderful when they do that. When you buy something, and a certain percentage, will come to us. So we always advertise that on Instagram. We have a huge social media presence, and you can always usually find different types of things, of campaigns that we're running,
Right.
and just donating. As I
Yeah.
said, just $5, $10, up to as much as somebody wants to. Unfortunately, the cost of any of these things is not cheap. I
Right.
mean, a box of Menopur is ridiculous. 5 vials is ridiculously expensive, but if we can provide that for somebody, that's saving them $350 to $400. So,
Amazing. And I think,
it
again,
is.
the people that have the insurance through their companies, most of those companies match
Yes.
donations. So if you are lucky
Yes.
and fortunate enough to be at one of those great companies, please
Hmm.
donate and have your company match that, because you will make somebody so happy. And of
True.
course, again, Pamela and their team are doing the heavy work at Baby Quest to pass it on, but what we can do is help to grow those funds to help more people.
And you grow awareness, because the more
Absolutely.
people who are aware of the fact that we exist, the better it is, and the less skepticism there is out there about, oh, are you really legitimate?
100%. I could not agree with you more. The more we talk about it, the more everyone knows this is a thing,
Hmm.
and it's possible, and you could potentially be that next recipient, and that would be amazing. So,
True.
well, thank you so much for being here and laying it all out on the line for us, Pamela, so everyone understands how the process works, and just educating us on it, because I think that there's a lot of ins and outs, and you gave us the insider tips of what to look for on the website and everything if somebody is applying. So like she said, do your homework, and it's all there, so you should be able to look for the hidden advice in there. So thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Friends with Fertility. We hope that you found the stories, insights, and tips as inspiring and informative as we did. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Your friends with fertility are here for you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and more fertility resources. Until next time, stay hopeful and keep believing in your journey, and know that we are sending you lots of love.